just don't wanna like push back, but I'm pushing a lot of stuff right now, so I'm like, I don't wanna overstep and, yeah. But I think it's beneficial.
I do, because they haven't had, I don't think we've ever done a full simulation for Derby schools. So that'd be great. I think it'd be great. Okay. Ready, Caleb?
Oh, no.
Okay. We're trying to get workshop videos all virtual because we want to be able to have them available if someone's gone, instead of my little lovely Zoom recordings that aren't so hot. So we're trying to get them. So he's just going to record this lecture and then leave, and we'll do the other ones later. So we're excited about our night course. Those teachers are so excited. In fact, it's kind of hard because you're spreading intro from, if you think of our 2-week class of intro, it's being spread out from January to May. They won't even start working with students until June. So a lot of them are really, they're like itching to do something, and it's gonna be like till June.
We learned so much.
Yeah. So it's just kind of funny, the whole thing. I know. And the fun thing for me is my brother decided to take the class. My brother he ran a body shop for 30 years, and then he retired, and he's doing the PDR, like hell dent repair, on the side. But he's moved to Roy, Washington, and he's living there, and then he comes back here and he works for my uncle some, and he's going back and forth, but he said, I want to take your class. I'm like, why? He said, because I'm dyslexic and I need to learn how to read better, and I want to know what's going on, and my grandkids are probably going to be dyslexic. I'm like, okay. He's going to work with his stepson. So it's been eye-opening for him, and he is like telling me stuff he's never told me. Like, I struggled with that and this. I mean, we really were both struggling in our own little quietness, and nobody ever knew. So that's kind of sad, really. But it's been interesting. So okay, so you need the lecture and then the student transition worksheet. We'll look through that worksheet. I made kind of a worksheet that you can use to start transitioning students through. If you have a student leaving, it's more like, this is for middle school and college. So it's not for elementary, because they're asking questions that are more middle school based, college based. I was thinking about RLA kids that would be leaving here and moving on to middle school is what I had in mind. So these are things that you can do with Milo, Stacy, on your own. So are we ready, Caleb? Huh? Can you find the mic?
Yeah.
Okay. And they just moved to a new house, so they're excited. Is that her alien self?
Nah, it's just
Her
inner self.
Her inner self. Okay, tell me when you're ready.
Keep it back up. Keep it back up just in case I want.
Okay.
Just set my. Good to go.
Okay. So we're gonna look at dyslexia and transitions. You have a lecture handout, and you also have the student transitioning worksheet. So we're gonna look at what transitions are. And if you look at transitions, it's a significant time in a person's life which may result in the change of setting or mindset that requires the individual to step up to a challenge. So all of us have transitions within our life. And there's been some studies on transitions. Professionals in education and counseling use the term transitions to group significant times in that person's life, which they might change to a new job, they might get married, they might move to a different school, move to a different town. So all these transitions are hard for the average person, but if you look at the person that has learning differences, that person can have a lot more challenges, and it can result in extra confusion in the process of learning new skill sets, thinking and rules. At times, the individual with learning differences may be ill-prepared to take on some of those struggles, resulting in less developmental process than others who are transitioning. If one considers that a person may move or transition from home to early schooling or elementary, middle school, secondary schools, and even college or employment, all those challenges are hard for everyone, average person, but they can seem insurmountable for a child or a person that has learning differences. Research on successful adults with learning differences has yielded a model that parents, professionals, and others might use to view these transitions. They found the idea that some adults with learning disabilities can conquer these challenges of school and early life to thrive is a concept that's little explored in research. However, considering that individuals with dyslexia and other academic struggles are successful, and we've seen a lot of them. If you look at the Fortune 500 magazine, look how many adult dyslexics there are that are successful. They've become successful entrepreneurs. We have successful scientists out there that are adult dyslexics. We have successful engineers. We have actors and actresses that we see out there in the field that do become successful. And why are those individuals successful and others aren't? So we're going to look at some reasons why maybe some of those individuals are successful and some aren't. Although there's limited research on successful adults with learning disabilities, it has yielded a model that parents, professionals, and others might use to view these transitions. So we're going to look at that model, and this model comes from research done and presented in the IDA Perspectives magazine. I went and researched several IDA magazines. I did some research also in some of the IDA handouts that they have. They're just the facts handouts, so I looked into that as well. And then I took into account the transitions that we've been doing at RLA. And we've been doing that for several years, where we had to transition students from RLA into a middle school. So we can't just say, oh, bye, we'll see you later. We actually have to work with those students and make sure they're prepared to be successful in whatever school that they're going to enter. Jill Hodge, she's gone around and actually researched all these different schools in town to see which schools would be best for our kids to transition into. And so she went around and she interviewed principals, she interviewed teachers and a bunch of private schools, some online schools, public schools. And that way, the parents could have a list of different schools that they might be able to look at to see which school might be best for their child to transition into. That would have been really helpful for me as a parent. My children went from being homeschooled. Two of them went from, or Austin went from being homeschooled right into public school. And it went okay, but there's things that could have gone better. And then Minette transferred from homeschool to private school. And there's a lot of things that could have gone better there. And I tried to inform the teachers and the principals and everything the best that I could. But if I think there's things that could have been done that could have helped them tremendously. So let's look at transitioning students out of alphabetic phonics into regular reading curriculum or into a different school. First of all, we have to see if they meet these criteria. Do they have psychological readiness? Do they have academic readiness? So we're going to look at the psychological readiness first. And there's a chart for the psychological readiness. It comes out of from IDEA. And Snyder's, Gerber, and Goldberg created this chart in 2015 and 16. This model was a result of two studies that focused on individuals with learning disabilities and dyslexia. So in this chart, you have different factors. You have internal factors, linking factors, and external factors. So we're going to break down those different factors that we're going to look at. And if you look at the psychological readiness on your student transitioning worksheet, we're going to look at some questions that you can talk to your student about, ask your student, and these things will help them make sure that they're psychologically ready to transfer. So let's look at some internal factors first. The first category is internal factors, which describes a cluster of factors that the student can process, use, and implement on his or her own without outside help. So these are things that we're hoping the students can do on their own. Can they do them on their own? Let's look at the first factor there. It's desire, which is defined as wanting to get ahead or excel. And the big thing that your kids need with the desire is they need that perseverance, and they also need the persistence. So let's look at the question for desire. If you are talking to your student, you might say, what are your desires? What are your goals? Have your student write down the desires and the goals that they have for themselves and their future. What are you interested in? What do you want to accomplish in life? What do you want to do when you get out of school? So it's just finding out their interest, maybe looking at some of their talents and figuring out what they want to do when they get out of school. Then the next one with the perseverance and persistence, it's a willingness to do whatever it takes to accomplish a goal, and the importance of keeping going despite adversity. And we already see this in a lot of our students. I was even talking to Drayton last night, and I said, Drayton, you have lots of perseverance. I said, you know, you've always had lots of perseverance to hang in there, whether things are going good or whether they're going bad. I said, that's really a gift. And he's like, yeah, he says, sometimes he thinks it's not a gift because then he doesn't change doesn't change the situation. But for this one, you're going to ask the students, how have you persevered through the challenges you've had with reading over the last few years? What are some of the things that you have persevered through to what have you overcome? So have them think about some of the things they've overcome, how they've persevered through some of those things. The next thing is goal setting and orientation. Goal setting is individuals describe this factor as setting specific, flexible, and realistic goals consciously and explicitly related to their desires. So their goal setting is going to go back and relate to what they want. So for the goal setting, you want to list goals that you would like to accomplish in the next few years. What are some things you'd like to accomplish in the next few years? Maybe some certain classes you want to take. Maybe there are some, maybe you want to take some tech classes in high school because you're really interested in welding or auto body work, or maybe you're really interested in art. You want to get more into art. Maybe you're interested in mechanics. Maybe you're interested in nursing and you want to take some classes where you can become a CNA. You can become a CNA before you graduate. There's a lot of things out there that our kids are unaware of, and we need to help our kids be aware of it. And the cool thing is right now, there are more things that our kids can do out in the field beyond school than there ever have been. I wish I would have known more for my kids when they were in high school, because I probably would have enrolled them in more tech classes that met their interests. Because oftentimes the classes at high school were not classes that met their interest. And look at the tech classes, look at the junior colleges. What kind of things can that student do? Talk to the counselors and get the counselors involved as well at school, because we want this child to be successful. I remember back in high school, my senior year, the second semester my senior year was kind of a PED year. I didn't do anything worthwhile. I took a cake decorating class. I took, all these different, I took a sewing class, which, those were things I was interested in. But I remember not realizing I could have graduated that semester and went to junior college. And when I found out other kids did that, I was really quite irritated, because I'm like, heck, I could have graduated semester, went to junior college. I just wasted a whole semester. I could have, invested in something else. And oftentimes our kids don't even get offered those opportunities because they're not the best academic students. But, those opportunities are still available and open for everyone. So I think that, it's important that our kids know about that. The next part is self-awareness, which includes one's awareness of strengths, weaknesses, and talents, as well as compartmentalizing one's learning difference and picking a niche to capitalize on strengths. So during this part, the most important thing is that the child understands what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, what are some things that you're really, really good at, and what are some things that are your weaknesses. Then we need to look at honing in on those strengths of that child, because that's what the child's going to grow up to do. My oldest son, or my middle son, Austin, his strengths have always been in mechanics. So as a child, he'd be taking everything apart. He was quite dangerous, actually. But he'd take things apart. He had to find out how they worked. He was always like tearing up something that I got because he was playing with it, and then he'd take it apart and try to put it back together. Well, he definitely had like those visual, spatial, kinesthetic skills, and of understanding gears and how things worked and all those things. So when I homeschooled, I tried to hone in on his gifts. And that's what he's going to grow up to do. He's going to graduate this year as a mechanical engineer, right up his alley. And a lot of our kids back in RLA, they all have different gifts and talents. Some of their gifts and talents lie in art. Milo's, I still think he's going to become a famous actor because he is like directing his own little acting shows out on the playground. And they are hilarious. So, but he, he has the gift of being funny, and he has a gift of getting other kids involved. Like he's a little director out there and telling them what to do. And it's just fun to watch what some of these kids come up with and what they can do. And so, find those students' strengths, and then they need to know their weaknesses as well, because we all have weaknesses as well. And Austin, he's found his weakness is in writing. And so he definitely doesn't want a job where he has to go write things. He'll put it off and put it off and procrastinate and never get it done because he hates it. So, find out what they really like to do and what they don't like to do. The next group of factors, it's considered a linkage. Linking factors help students move from desires and goals related to their strengths and weaknesses to the outside. So, as with the previous group, linking factors require individuals to carefully think about each factor, while a parent, teacher, or therapist helps them along in their thinking. So it's just talking to the child, kind of interviewing the child, but they need some guidance. This isn't something they're going to sit down and do on their own. It's not like a worksheet that you can hand them to fill out. This is something that they need help guiding. This is something you could do one at a time during verbal and the written. So you could do this during verbal and the written expression. If you know this child's going to transition in the next year, throughout the year, you could incorporate some of these things during verbal and the written. They could even share these things with their group. Some of the things that are more personal, you might have to do individually, but a lot of these things could be shared with the group, because a lot of the kids in the group that work with these kids, they already know. They already know what that child's strengths are. They already know what their gifts are because they've seen these strengths throughout the years that they've been in their group. These linking factors are listed as flowing from top to bottom, indicating that each builds on the other. So the first linking factor is emotional coping, and is the effective means to reduce and cope with stress, frustration, and emotional problems. So this is helping the kid list ways, or the student list ways that they can reduce their stress and frustration. If you get stressed or frustrated, what do you do? Do you take a walk? Do you run? Do you exercise? Do you, do you need to go outside for a while? What helps you reduce your stress and frustration? Maybe it's video games. I know my husband, he comes home from work to reduce his stress and frustration. He just plays a video game for an hour, because it just gives his mind a break, gives his mind something else to do. Do you talk with your friends? Do you spend time with your friends? List things that help. That way they know, these are the things that help me when I am stressed or frustrated. I can go to this list and not get quite so overwhelmed. Reframing is the next one. It's the second factor, which is redefining an individual's learning disability as positive and productive. And I think we're pretty good at that as therapists. We're pretty good at redefining dyslexia as positive and productive. Maybe not so much ADHD. But you know what? ADHD, there's a lot of positive things about ADHD. So on that, it's what are your dyslexic gifts? You could even talk about what are your ADHD gifts. My dad loves to hire employees that are ADHD. He says they are the best workers ever. And it's because they can hyper focus on the job if it's something that interests them. And my dad runs a body shop. If it's something that interests them, they can hyper focus on the job. And I mean, they can put out more work than any employee that he has. And so I've seen that with a lot of people that are ADHD. And I have several therapists that work for me that are ADHD. And let me tell you, they crank out more work than anyone. Because once they find something they love and they can hyper focus on, they get a lot done. And the other good thing about ADHD is they don't run out of energy. It's just amazing. I'm like, I'm exhausted. I don't even know how they keep up with all that they do. But sometimes I'm just like, wow, how do you get all that stuff done? So I have several employees that work under our area. And when I give them a project, I mean, they whip it out faster than anybody. It's awesome. So ADHD can really be a gift. It's not much of a gift when your brain's not interested in something. But when they get out in the world, then it really can be a gift. My children, we had a great pediatrician. He was ADHD and dyslexic and dysgraphic. And we used to go to him and he used to say, if you guys can just get through school, you'll be fine in life. School is hard, but if you could just get through school, you'll be fine in life because you're going to be able to put these gifts and talents that you have of the visual spatial skills and those strengths and the ADHD, you're going to be able to put them to work. And so I always loved him when we go in. The third factor is proactivity, and it's defined as engaging in the work, participating in the community, making decisions and acting upon them, being self-assertive and self-confident. So proactivity, how do you accomplish the goals that you want to accomplish? What do we need to do to proactively accomplish what I want to do? And so some of those things might be, I need to enroll in this class, or I need to take this class. I need to kind of have a study plan or a plan for myself to get to where I want to go. And we can involve lots of people in this. We can involve people on the outside. Maybe you have a child that wants to become a dentist. Well, visit with some dentists, or a child that wants to be a veterinarian. Well, get a job working as like a in the veterinary clinic cleaning cages so you can get to know the veterinarian. You want to become a physical therapist. Talk to physical therapists in town and see if you can watch what they do and see if that's something you really want to do. When I was in high school, I did realize I wanted to work with kids. I knew I wanted to work with kids. And so probably one of the best classes I took was, it was like a beginning child care, child study class. And I got to go into preschools during the school day. I got to go to several preschools and I got to learn how that preschool teacher, they were private preschools, learn how the preschool teacher taught kids and learn what she did. And I got to go over there at least once or twice a week. And then eventually I even got to do some lesson plans to start working with these preschoolers in high school. So that was pretty cool. And then I was like, oh, I want a degree in early childhood. So then that's what led me to have an interest in early childhood. But if they're interested in body work or plumbing or whatever, there are so many people willing to kind of be some mentors for kids. So help connect them with the right people in their life that can help them meet the goals that they want. The next one is goodness of fit. That's the final linking factor. Individuals who use this linking factor fit themselves into environments where they're going to succeed. So in order to fit them in an environment that they're going to succeed, then you have to figure out, how do you learn best? They need to know, which we've been really good as therapists working with our kids all throughout alphabetic phonics, starting with lesson 1, talking about visual, auditory, and kinesthetic learners. We've been really good about talking about how we learn best. But it's helpful to put some of these ideas down on paper for these kids so they can really think about how they learn best. And it's also helpful to help them communicate to their teachers how they learn best. That's the hardest piece. Our kids really have a hard time communicating to others how they learn best. And we're going to talk about that at the end of this lecture. We're going to talk about accommodations and modifications that we can help our kids realize which accommodations and modifications they need in order to learn best. So we want to help make them aware and make them be a part of coming up with the accommodations and modifications that they need. Because if they're involved in planning those and coming up with those, they're much more likely to be happy with the implementation of it. Instead of us saying, well, you need this, this, and this, and the child must say, no, I don't need that. Why is the teacher doing that? They may decide they don't need it. So the next part of the model is external factors. One of the external factors is learn creativity, and it represents the strategies and techniques the individual needs to enhance his or her abilities. Additionally, this factor means the individual learns to take advantage of his or her strengths and adapt to excel within a system designed to expose his or her weaknesses. So this one's pretty tough. But it's, you might ask them questions like, what classes do you need to enhance your abilities? What kind of things do you need to enhance your abilities? And how can you accomplish the goals you want to accomplish? So these things, the different classes to enhance their abilities might be, a shop class that's in high school, some kind of shop class, or there might be things like a sewing class, or if you want to become a seamstress, there might be other things outside of school, tech classes that they want to take. There's all sorts of tech classes out there right now. The other thing is, I think they have to understand their strengths and some of their weaknesses. So my son, Austin, I remember him in school, like we were talking about some of his accommodations. His strength was auditory learning. He could sit in class and he could listen and he could remember what the teacher said. But his weakness was dysgraphia and writing quickly. So he could not sit in class and listen to the teacher and take notes. And he would tell me, Mom, if I take notes, I have no idea what the teacher said the entire class. I miss out on the entire class. So, we honed in on his strength and had an accommodation made for him so he didn't have to take notes. He could just sit and listen. And that made a huge difference in his life. So that's just one example. The other thing is support systems. So social ecologies, they're defined as getting help or surrounding self with those significant others who provide support, guidance, encouragement, and who consciously act as mentors. So all our kids need a support system. Help them write down, who is your support system? Who can you reach out to help you when you need different things? So, Any comments on those? And Caleb, we might move this over there so you can hear their comments. So any comments from you guys about any of your students?
I mean, she figured out a lot of these things, but oh my gosh, it was so
I know.
yes.
So what do you guys want? I have 2 more lectures to write. So that makes me. As, you know, teaching them how to, open a locker, taking a road trip to school. I remember. Walk the classes out, we open the locker. About it, and then people. Nobody knew at all. And, you know, it's, you know, even for college class, college kids, it's not. I think this stuff is good for them. Think about their kids. Like, as well. You can't do that anymore. You get to 6th grade, blah, blah, blah. This is gonna happen. So you better straighten up because you can't, it's almost like, it's giving all the kids so much anxiety. Have you ever been parent teachers? You know, Liz, you are. You know, it gives them so much anxiety. For school because they think it's gonna be this big scary place. Old, you know, all these things are gonna happen. Did that happen to you, Caleb?
Yeah, but I think so. The class is
Um, you know, and you get, to choose your classes. And most likely. That there are a few things you have to do.
Those are all good points. Well, let's look at academic readiness. So we're going to look at academic readiness, and this is going to look a lot like what you see in your benchmark. So these are things that we're going to get off the schedules that they've completed and the benchmark levels that they completed. So you have a sheet that looks like this. And so with the academic readiness, you know, of course, we want to write down what's their current school, what school are they going to transition into, what's the transition date, their name, date of birth, grade, how many months or years have they been in alphabetic phonics training, what level did they complete? So did they complete, you know, Schedule 2C, 3A, 3B, 3C? What level of benchmarks did they pass? What level of benchmark did they pass in alphabet? What about reading, spelling, handwriting? Then give them a fluency and accuracy assessment. The fluency and accuracy assessment, where we can see, give them a passage on their grade level and see how many words can they read per minute? How many words are they getting accurate? And I think I skipped that before the handwriting. I said, you can also give them the handwriting fluency and accuracy assessment. So I'll back up there. I'll stop. So we also want to look at where are they in their reading skills? How are they doing with their reading skills? What level of benchmark did they pass with their reading skills? What level of benchmark did they pass with their spelling skills? Are they going to need some continued help in spelling? Are they going to need some kind of accommodation for spelling? How are they doing in handwriting? Are they fluent and automatic in their handwriting? Are they dysgraphic? You can look, when you look at handwriting, you can give them the handwriting fluency and accuracy assessment. Do you guys remember that last year where you copied the paragraph to see how many letters you could write in a minute? That's really a nice assessment to give to kids who are transitioning, because that can, you can say this child is writing so many letters per minute. There's no way they can keep up with taking notes in class. This child needs an accommodation for note taking, because they're just copying a paragraph. When you're note taking, you have to be able to spell, you have to be able to write fluently, you have to be able to listen and spell at the same time. I mean, that's a lot going on. So that's a great assessment to give to your kids before they transition somewhere, just to see where are they at just a general copying, where are they, how fast can they copy something. The other thing that's really good is the fluency and accuracy assessment, which you're probably already getting that if you do Ames Web or FastBridge, that kind of thing. You can kind of see where, what is their fluency rate? What is their accuracy rate? If their fluency rate is low, let's say we're able to comprehend what we read, but we're still reading at like 80 words per minute. You know, but I'm reading at 80 words per minute with like 98% accuracy. So, you know, that child can read and they can read accurately, but the problem is, can they keep up? If a child has a low fluency rate, but their accuracy rate is good, they're not going to be able to keep up with the other kids in middle school and high school when they're given a book. They need an accommodation. They need an accommodation of an audiobook or Bookshare, and we'll talk a little more about those when we look at accommodations, but they're going to need an accommodation in order to make the playing field even, where they can keep up with the rest of the kids in the class and they can get all the content that everyone else is getting. My daughter, she was reading really well and she was reading fluently, but she was in a school that was I can't even think what it is called, but she was in a school that really emphasized lots and lots of books, and she could not keep up with all those books without doing audiobooks. She had to listen to quite a few audiobooks in order to keep up. You also want to look at their overall comprehension. How do they comprehend best? Do they comprehend best by listening? Or do they comprehend best by reading themselves? Do they comprehend best when they can read themselves and highlight something? Or some of our kids need to listen to it audible and have the book in front of them and highlight it at the same time. So it all depends on what works best for that child, what helps them overall comprehend what they're reading. The next thing is written expression abilities. Here you want to see, can they write a paragraph? When they write a paragraph, do they understand sentence structure and paragraph structure? Do they understand you have to have a topic sentence, you have to have supporting sentences with details, and then you wrap it up with a concluding sentence? Do they understand those things? Do they understand contextual conventions such as capitalization and punctuation and commas? If they need help on some of these things, then they might need like Grammarly, or they might need some other computerized help in order to help them write. They might need text to speech. If they don't have good written expression abilities, they might need text to speech and be able to speak in their paper or have a scribe of some type. Then what is their present level in math? And the reason we're looking at math, even though we focus on reading, is oftentimes reading there's a lot of reading involved in math. You know, do they need some accommodations in math to be successful? So we'll look at some accommodations in math. What are their present levels for phonological awareness? If they're younger, how do they do a sentence segmentation, syllable segmentation, rhyming, phoneme segmentation, blending, and manipulation? So those are all things that we need to look at as we're looking at how are they academically? Are they academically ready? So let's look at steps to transition students out of alphabetic phonics into regular reading curriculum, into the regular classroom. Do they meet these two criteria, psychological readiness and academic readiness? Then if they do, then we're ready to implement a transition plan with the support of either an IEP or a 504. Some of the students you work with might already have an IEP. If they already have an IEP, you want to keep that IEP because IEPs carry more weight than 504s. And with IEPs, you get the accommodations you would get in a 504. If they need a lot of extra support in different classrooms, in a different classroom setting than the regular classroom, then you do want to look at the IEP and not the 504. A 504 is just your accommodations in the regular classroom. So let's quickly go over, we've had a class on IDEA and IEPs. We're just going to touch on this for 1 minute. We're going to touch on the difference between the IEP and the 504, and then we're going to look at some accommodations. So with the IEP, it's under the law of IDEA. It's the Individuals with Disabilities Act, which was originally known as the Education for All Handicapped Act, or they call it Public Law 94-142. Congress passed it in 1975. They renamed it later as IDEA in 1990. The goals of this act were to protect the rights of children with disabilities, to meet the needs of children with disabilities, and to improve the outcomes for children with disabilities and for their families. So that's the goal for IDEA. The free component or the key components in IDEA are free and appropriate public education. They call it FAPE. It's special education and related services that meet the child's need. An individual educational program, which is an IEP, an educational plan tailored to each student's needs, and LRE, which is least restrictive environment. Children with disabilities should be educated with non-disabled children as much as possible. The next one is parent involvement. Parents should be involved in developing their child's educational plan. Then you have procedural safeguards, which parents have the right to challenge decisions about their child's education. So, in order for a parent or a child to take advantage of IDEA, they have to have an educational evaluation done. So that's what we do with a lot of kids here. Even though we're a private school, our RLA kids are ready to transition from RLA into a different school, into the regular classroom. And the schools know that our kids here at RLA are receiving pretty much an individualized educational plan since they started RLA. And they're receiving all the accommodations they need at RLA. So what we do is about the year before we know the child's going to transition out, we request that they get an educational evaluation done through the school district they're going to transition into. So if you're going to transition into Goddard School District, then that parent lives in Goddard School District. So they're going to contact Goddard School District, and Goddard School District is going to do that educational evaluation of that child before they leave our school and transition into Goddard Middle School. So the parent will have to contact whatever school district that they are currently living in to get that educational evaluation. Once that educational evaluation is done with the child, then they will meet with the parent, they'll meet with our principal, and they might meet with their academic language therapist that is doing their alphabetic phonics program. They might even include the math teacher, but they'll have a meeting with the parent and our principal and maybe one of our therapists here, and then they'll meet with their school team to decide what is best for this child moving forward to have a successful transition into whatever middle school that they're moving into. So what are the benefits of IDEA are to ensure that public schools provide equal access to education for children with disabilities. They help children with disabilities succeed by providing them with the resources and services they need. And they prevent many students with disabilities from going without educational opportunities. So that is IDEA. The other option is you can have all kids tested for IDEA. That doesn't mean all kids will qualify for an individual educational plan. So our kids here will have them tested. If they don't qualify for the individual educational plan moving into their next school, then we go 504 route. And the 504 route, 504 is that Rehabilitation Act of 1973, the Americans with Disabilities Act, prohibits discrimination against persons with disabilities in any program receiving federal financial assistance. So that's all schools. It's many private schools as well. So that's who qualifies for this. Any person who has a mental or physical impairment, which substantially limits one or more major life activity, such as caring for oneself, performing manual tasks, walking, seeing, hearing, speaking, breathing, learning, working, sleeping, standing, lifting, reading, concentrating, thinking, communicating, helping, eating, bending, and operation of bodily functions. So our kids who are dyslexic definitely qualify for this. Many of our kids, they have the learning issues and they also have the reading issues. Some of them have concentration issues or communication issues. So, you know, all our kids have qualified under 504 if they're dyslexic or ADHD. The school district has a responsibility to provide accommodations and services to eligible individuals with disabilities. The district acknowledges its responsibilities under Section 504 to avoid discrimination in policies and practices regarding its personnel and students. No discrimination against any person with a disability shall knowingly be permitted in a program or practice in the school. So IDEA, they decided a few years ago that it wasn't, they didn't go deep enough into the definition. So they decided to be more specific in their definition in 2009 to include more major life activities, and they added several other activities. So they added eating, sleeping, you know, they had standing, lifting, bending, concentrating, thinking, communicating. So lots of things can fall under here. So more kids could qualify for a 504. Yes, sure.
They don't.
For 504, if they have trouble with any of those, then that suffices. For IEPs, they won't always put dyslexia on the IEP unless they're diagnosed as being dyslexic. But if they have a diagnosis of ADHD, go that route. Because it's way easier, like if the doctor says they're ADHD, it's way easier to get an IEP for ADHD than it is for dyslexia. We're hoping in the state of Kansas that changes. Right now in 2023, they said in the state of Kansas, psychologists may diagnose dyslexia in the schools and they may write it on the IEPs, but they're still not doing it. They're diagnosing it as a specific learning disability. So it's really frustrating because they won't put it on the IEP, even though they're told they can put it on the IEP. Some districts are totally resisting doing it, and they'll only put it on an IEP if the parent got an outside evaluation. Well, outside evaluations are expensive, and not all parents can afford it. So it's really a catch-22 right now. It's a mess. And so I would, before they transition from your room, then hopefully, since they transition, they stay in the same school till high school.
Yeah.
Okay. So, to me, if they're end up in your classroom, then they're probably dyslexic and they need accommodations. And so I think you could push to get the accommodations because they're probably getting them anyways. It's just not written down. And that's what a lot of elementary school teachers say. Well, I'm giving them the accommodations. And I'm like, well, that's fine and great. I'm so glad that you're willing to help them and get them the accommodations, but what happens next year? What makes sure what guarantees that they're going to get the accommodations they need next year with the next teacher? And then when they transition to a new school, what happens then? And we're going to look at assessments in a minute. If you don't have accommodations written down somewhere, you can't get accommodations on ACT and SAT and your state testing if you don't have it recorded somewhere that child's getting their accommodations all year long. Then when it comes to state testing, then you're not going to get the accommodations. And really, the accommodations are only going to make the child do better on the state assessments and make the school look better. So really, it's a benefit for the school. Yes. Do you do that?
I would tell my parents, my middle school kids about 504 going, I think our school does do a good job, but also when they go to college and different to have that.
Right.
On there, but I wanted to make sure that they could
Well,
get the screener,
Right. Well, I will find out for sure. It's probably a Barb Orsi question. So, but I'll ask her for sure and let you know. Melissa? I've heard bits and pieces. There's certain parts that they can, but there's certain parts that they can't. So. Right.
I think that it depends on the college, the SAT, ACT, and I believe that currently the ACT, SAT comprehension can be read to you because comprehension is not a true, it should not be a true test of your reading skills.
Yeah, I should be stated that.
Right, but that would be the thing, like on the comprehension part of the state assessment. I believe based on the ACT, SAT, that normally, like, it goes top down.
I agree.
And so but I think it's maybe changed.
our special ed department did have to go through the steps, and I can't remember how many Diane said that were approved to have.
Because past it was always like, if they've been getting grade last year.
I'm wondering if they don't want to go through the steps and the processes of doing it. Yeah, that is another good question for Barb. Right. It would make it look better.
So
Yeah, so. I need to ask Barb and see, because she keeps up on all that stuff. That there must be if Michelle's school's doing it, because Michelle's school is charter, but still it's pretty well public school. You're public, oh, you are public, okay. So they are their own district, so just a small public school, right? Oh, okay, okay. So,
I also believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that you have a higher chance of accommodations on the ACT, SAT.
huh,
So like we were coached that you need one in middle school and you need one in high school.
mhm.
Because if you only are evaluated in high school, the SAT or ACT can say that you're only trying to use those accommodations on college entrance exams. And they started, they want a history. so they
Oh,
want
interesting.
multiple
Mhm.
documentations, multiple years of time between educational evaluation.
Wow. That's, you know, that's,
Maybe on, she told us, we went in first grade, we go back in sixth grade, we go back as a sophomore in high
wow,
school.
that's too much money,
But we're in a private school,
right?
so.
But that's a lot of
they
money.
also-
Yeah, let's take a break real quick. We're gonna take a break. Okay, with 504, you need to know the difference between impairment and disability. The definition that draws a distinction between impairment and disability is people have many more impairments than they do with disabilities. The difference lies in the effect that the impairment, the effect that the impairment has on the person. If the impairment causes a substantial limitation of a major life activity, then that person has a disability. So if the impairment does not cause a substantial limit on that person, then it's just an impairment, not a disability. So kind of think about that as you're creating a 504 plan, or and what is going on with the child. So, does the student need accommodations or modifications? There's a difference between accommodating a child and modifying. So let's look at the difference between accommodations and modifications. Choosing between accommodation or modification is a decision crucial for future educational choices. Modifications can change instructional content and knowledge and their assessment. Accommodations don't. So, modifications, you're actually modifying how they receive the content, and you're modifying how we test the knowledge of the content, where accommodations were not. A student's IEP 504 team is responsible for making a formal decision related to accommodations or modifications if warranted. So you can get both on a 504, you can get accommodations, you can get modifications, but you have to decide which one the child needs. Accommodations are provided for both testing and instruction. They change the way a student accesses information and demonstrates their knowledge of whatever skill they're working on or their ability. They do not change academic standards or expectations. So those academic standards and expectations remain the same. So they're the same as every other child in the classroom, but they're able to get maybe a different way of delivering or a different way of presenting. The purpose of the accommodation is to ensure equal access to the full school experience for the student with dyslexia or other learning disabilities, such as maybe we're providing extended time on the exam for a student who has slow processing speed, affecting their academic fluency. So that would be an example of an accommodation. Accommodations do not change the content of the instruction. So if the child got extra time on their test, they're still taking the same test as everyone else. They just get extended time because it's because of their slow processing speed. And they don't change the skills or knowledge that is being measured on the tests. So accommodations are just adjustments made to allow the student to demonstrate that knowledge or skill and abilities without lowering the learning or performance expectations, without changing what's being measured. So an example might be providing an audio format for the child if maybe they need to listen to it instead of read it themselves. Like the state assessment, maybe they need the state assessment read to them, but they know the knowledge. You know, maybe they need it read to them so they can put it down. Because the target skill is still being tested, so it's not changing what we're getting from the kids. Oftentimes when it comes to accommodations and modifications, what we hear is, it's not fair to the rest of the kids in the class. I like what Rick Lavoie has to say about this. So we're going to look at a short video by Rick Lavoie. And why is it not wanting to play? Here we go. It was embedded in here. Let's do it a different way. Okay, speed. Okay, we'll watch that later. I don't know which one I want it. I do want to tell you, Rick Lavoie, he was, have you guys ever read any of his books or heard of any of his? I know some of you have seen the films, his films in the past, but Rick Lavoie has, a film called Fat City. It stands for frustration, anxiety, and tension. And it's actually the simulation that we do. That's where the simulation came from. And it's taking through these people, these teachers, educators, psychologists, and parents through that simulation. And you get to watch how they experience the simulation. And you get to watch their comments and everything. It was made in like the 80s, and it's one of the most watched films ever. It's really great. It's called How Difficult Can This Be? Fat City by Rick Lavoie. He's also got several other videos out there. One is called When the Chips Are Down. One is called the last one picked, the first one picked on. And then there's another one called Motivation Breakthrough. But he ran a school for children that had learning differences, and he's got some great ideas in there. He also has written several books that go with the videos. So great things to watch. And now it's working on my computer, but it's not working there. We'll just move on. We'll come back to that. Accommodations make it possible for students with dyslexia to demonstrate their learning without being hindered by their disabilities. So appropriate accommodations need to be integrated in the normal cycle of teaching and testing, never reserved for periods of assessment. So they need to be done all throughout the year, not just, oh, okay, we're going to take an assessment, so we need accommodation now. Classroom accommodations make it possible for the student to learn and demonstrate their learning through full participation in the classroom instruction. Assessment accommodations are changes in the assessment materials and etc., such as maybe they get large print, maybe they get extended time, maybe we get to have a different procedure for the way they're taking the assessment. Maybe a child has their spelling test given out in the hall orally, and maybe he doesn't have to write his spelling words. The teacher just gives it to him orally, and the child spells the words orally. But all these things allow the student to demonstrate their abilities, not their disabilities during the tests or exams. Without accommodations, an assessment may not accurately measure the knowledge and skill of the student that has learning disabilities. So the accommodation does not change the item on the test or the test validity, which that's what a lot of people don't understand. They don't understand that it doesn't change what the child's demonstration of knowledge. We want to choose accommodations wisely and purposefully. Each accommodation needs to be well matched to the individual student's educational needs. We need to decide which accommodations are needed to ensure that that student is on equal footing with those that do not have a disability. We want to provide evidence to support choice of accommodation requests. And are the accommodations linked directly to the student's functional limitations? So that's how the student transitioning worksheet's going to help you. It's going to help you know what supports does that student need? How are they performing in all these different areas? They might need a support in reading, or they may not need a support in math, or they might need a support in only certain classes. They may not need a support in every class. And that's what I found with my kids when they were in high school. They didn't need every accommodation in every class. They only needed it for certain classes. And oftentimes it was depending on how the teacher delivered information, and that changed their need for the accommodations. Accommodations, or let's look at modifications. Modifications are different than accommodations. Modifications to curriculum are like curriculum content, such as homework assignments. Maybe the child is only has a math homework assignment and they only have to do 10 problems where the rest of the class has to do 20. Or maybe the child has spelling words and they only have to do 10 spelling words where the rest of the children have to do 20 spelling words. So it's a modification to the curriculum content or homework assignments or assessments which change the nature of instruction and assessments of what the student is expected to learn. An example of an instructional modification might include an assignment of math problems requiring low-level math knowledge. So maybe the rest of the class has moved on to long division, but this other child, his assignment is still working on single-digit division, where the rest of the class is working on double and triple digit division. So that's an example of a modification. So oftentimes they're not learning the same exact thing as the rest of the class. A modification of curriculum content might be to teach different lower level concepts of information, such as a continuation of working on multiplication when the rest of them are moving on to fractions. Assessment modifications might include the use of a calculator. So maybe they get a calculator on a test of math facts of accuracy, or maybe they get text in an audio format when reading comprehension, when the reading comprehension skill is being measured. So maybe you're more measuring listening comprehension skills than their reading comprehension skills. Modifications can be allowed for both testing and instruction if the validity of the test item or content of the instruction is affected or altered. Then that's when you know you have a modification and not an accommodation. Any questions or responses on that? Does that make sense? So we're going to look at the 4 types of accommodations and modifications. The 4 types are: you can modify or accommodate the presentation style. You can do it, modify or accommodate the response of the child, the setting in which learning takes place, or the timing or scheduling in which learning takes place. So if you're going to look at modifying or accommodating the presentation style, this allows students to access instructional materials in ways that do not require them to read standard print presented in a standard visual format. So here's some ideas of presentation accommodations. Maybe you can modify verbal instructions. Maybe the child, I can think of a lot of ADHD kids who need a chart instead of verbal instructions. Maybe they need like a chart on their desk, a morning chart that says when you come in, you're going to put away your backpack, put away your lunch, put your assignment over here, and you give them visual pictures instead of verbally giving them instructions. And then they go look at their visual picture chart every morning instead of getting those verbal instructions. Because if you give them the verbal instructions, it's too many directions at one time. A lot of children who are autistic need picture prompts instead of verbal instructions. They have to do or have to have both. A lot of kids will need repetition of instructions, or sometimes the instructions, maybe they're written instructions and someone needs to read them to them. If they can't read, then they need to get the instructions read to them. Maybe fewer items on the page are required. Maybe visual prompts or cues like arrows on a page, or maybe the text is highlighted, or maybe they're able to get a copy of the teacher's notes and the teacher highlighted the stuff that's important for them. Maybe they can practice, maybe they can learn information in songs or poems to help them remember it. Some other presentation accommodations for assessments might be something like a calculator. I get a calculator to use on assessments. I get a calculator to use on my assignments, or I have speech to text software that's going to read the test to me. Maybe during a testing situation, I'm allowed to use electronic dictionary or spell checker, or I'm allowed to use like grammar checker. If the child uses that all the time in their everyday assignments, then they should be allowed to use like Grammarly or something if they are taking an assessment and it has to be written. Another response to accommodations. If you look at response to accommodations and modifications, this allows students alternatives for completion of activities, assignments, and tests. Students may be permitted to demonstrate their knowledge and skills in alternate ways. So something like this, a child has an assignment to research about an animal, research about the animal, the habitat, everything else, and they have to write a paper. Well, maybe instead of writing a paper, that child can create a diorama and they can talk about the animal and the habitat and all those things, and do something that they create instead of writing. So that would be an example of they're still doing the assignment, they're still meeting the requirements of the teacher, and they're still doing the research, but they're not having to write it. They're able to present it in a different way. Or maybe they're able to solve or organize their work using electronic device or an organizer. So some ways that children can respond that is an accommodation are maybe mark answers in a text in the test book instead of on a separate sheet of paper. If you have a child that is dyslexic or dysgraphic and they have directionality issues, those bubble tests where you have to have the little bubbles and you have your test book there and you have to fill out the bubbles. Oh my gosh, that could be an absolute nightmare. When I taught first grade, we had to do those bubble tests for all first graders. And I thought that was the craziest thing I'd ever done in my life. In fact, we had our pairs go back over the tests and they would make sure the bubbles were filled in. So we at least get it counted for when the kids didn't fill in the bubbles, right? But it was such a mess to have kids fill in bubbles, and a child who is dysgraphic or has directionality issues, you know, they may not do well on the test just because they can't keep on the right row. So nowadays, hopefully most of it's computer based and we don't have, I don't know, do you guys have to do the bubble things anymore? Okay, so that's out of there. We don't have to do that anymore. Well, that's good news. That's good news. So do you guys do it at your school still, Linda? Yeah, so some private schools might have to, like the Iowa Basics is what a lot of schools, private schools give still, and they're still the bubble test. Maybe to have things dictated to a scribe, and that person will record the responses on an audio recorder. I know for one of my students at a private school, I was working with them and I went in and I would do the state assessments I would, he would give me the answers and I would record it for him. So I was the recorder for him. And I would read the questions as well. Point to response choices or type response choices. Those can also be examples of accommodations. What about setting in the classroom? A setting accommodation is a change in location in which a test or assignment is given or the condition of the assessment setting. So maybe if you have a setting accommodation, the test is given to the individual by themselves or to a small group. In college, if you have an assessment accommodation or testing accommodation, you go down to the office and they have a private room where you will sit and take your exam. And you don't have to take it in the larger classroom, and then you get more time to take your exam as well. Maybe another setting accommodation when a child has to take a test, or maybe they even have to do their work, and you have a child that has a hard time focusing or concentrating. Maybe they can have a location in the classroom where they have a separate desk to sit for that. Maybe they have something around their desk to help with less visual distractions or auditory distractions. Maybe they have a set of noise canceling headphones, and those noise canceling headphones help them to be able to focus better. A lot of kids need a distraction-free setting. Sometimes kids need alternate furniture. Maybe they need a different type of chair. Maybe they need a standing desk. Maybe they need their desk moved to a different part of the room. Maybe it needs to be at the front of the room instead of the back of the room, so they're less distracted by all the kids in front of them. Timing and scheduling accommodations. Change the length of time for completion of a test. Maybe the length of time that a project's due or an assignment. May also change the way the time's organized. So some of these kids might have flexible scheduling. They might have extended time. Maybe they're allowed more frequent breaks. If you have a child who's ADHD, maybe they need frequent breaks where they can get up and walk around the room and do things like that. Or maybe they need the changing order of tasks or subtests. So now we're going to look at just some specific accommodations that I've used throughout the years to help our kids who are dyslexic. So these things have helped kids that I've worked with. I've put a lot of these accommodations on 504 plans and IEPs. And one of them is read text to child until he or she is fluent and accurate at their grade level. So they can get an audiobook or text until they're fluent and accurate at grade level. Audiobooks at or above grade level. It's very important for a child who struggles with dyslexia to continue to hear and comprehend text at his or her grade level so that their knowledge vocabulary continues to grow along with their peers. Another one that I've had to add to several elementary schools is AR tests. Not all schools are doing AR anymore, thank goodness. But some schools still do. And if they do, what would happen is my kids could only read the baby books. That's all they could read. Well, they don't want to be reading a baby book while the rest of their class is checking out something else. So I got it where they can listen to the book on an audiobook. Someone could read the book to them. For many of my students who were dyslexic that went to Goddard, I would read the book to those kids during listening time. When we finished the book, they would go to school and get to take an oral AR test, and they get credit for the book. But I was the one reading it to them during alphabetic phonics. Some kids need visuals. So, accommodation could be they get visuals for like vocabulary, my son, I remember he went to middle school and he's like, Mom, he said, those roots and stems are teaching me those roots and stems, but they don't have any key words or visuals. I can't remember them without that. I need some key words. I need some visuals in order to remember those different roots and stems. Some other accommodations for dyslexia are evening homework. The child's allowed to dictate answers to the parent, and the parent writes. And on my kids, I would just write, parent wrote, answers. We would get done with homework in 10 minutes instead of 2 hours. And, he had the answers. He was too worn out to do it himself. So that was one I used all the time. Reduced homework load, shortened assignments. Barb Orsi always says that child should spend the same amount of time doing his or her homework as an average student. So, the parent could say, we worked on the homework for 20 minutes. This is what we got done. And that's all we're doing. And that works as well. When written, this is a huge one for our kids. I have had this on all of my own children's 504s, and I've had it on all the kids I've worked with, all their 504s. When written responses are required to demonstrate knowledge in any area of the curriculum, the student should be graded on the content of their answer, not the mechanics, spelling, or handwriting. That is huge, because some teachers get really picky and they'll mark the answer wrong because it was misspelled, or they'll mark the answer wrong because the handwriting was too messy, or, and you can clearly tell the child has the correct answer. So we're flunking history because we can't spell. Or Drayton was, I got an F on my PE test because I can't spell. And I went to the PE teacher and I said, these are clearly the right answers. I can tell they're the right answers. And I said, he just can't spell aerobics and he can't spell certain things. I said, he does have this accommodation. I said, I didn't expect you to know it because you have 150 kids and I didn't know he'd need accommodation in PE. So, and the PE teacher was more than willing to change the grade. But, the grading on content is a really, really important accommodation. The other one that I've used a lot is get a paper copy of lecture notes to be provided so they can listen instead of take notes. Another one that we've used a lot is they need to be allowed to complete all written assignments on the computer. And that's for those kids that are severely dysgraphic and they might need a laptop or computer. If the school doesn't have something for the child to provide for them and the parent cannot afford a laptop or computer, look into Kansas Assistive Technology or Assistive Technology of Kansas. Assistive Technology of Kansas often has computers that can be checked out or other devices that can be borrowed or checked out, and they're free. It's like a library for Kansas and help for assistive technology. Resources for dysgraphia are, we already do cursive handwriting, but if you have a teacher looking for a resource for dysgraphia and the child's only dysgraphic and they're not dyslexic too, then Diana King has a great cursive writing skills book, and she has a right-handed edition and a left-handed edition. And then I like Diana Hamberry King's keyboarding skills. I like my kids to do that in place of other keyboarding classes, and oftentimes can get that as something that they do in alphabetic phonics on the side, and then they don't take the keyboarding class at the high school or the middle school because it's not something that they're going to do very well at. So, accommodations with assistive technology, access to and understanding of assistive technology can be critically important for individuals with learning disabilities. These kids, we need to allow them to use speech to text if they have challenges with writing, to have increased quantitative and qualitative written communication. Luckily, a lot of our kids who are dyslexic, they're no longer limited to the words that are within their spelling bank. They can use the words that in their mind because they can use assistive technology. Speech to text welcomes readers to listen to a variety of voices and speed rates. So using assistive technology can be very useful. We talked about a lot of assistive technology this summer, and the biggest thing is we have to teach them how to do it. So someone has to teach them how to use this assistive technology. It doesn't do any good if we just hand them the device. So we have to teach them how to do it. We have to work with them on how to use it. Other things that might be helpful or some kind of recording device. If you have a child that sits through, a lecture and needs to hear it again and again, if they're able to record it, especially in college, if they're able to record the lecture and re-listen to it, that helps a lot. Some great places, and we talked about that this summer, Bookshare. When you become a therapist, if you are a COUT or a CALP, you can sign off on Bookshare for a child and say this child has a learning difference and they need Bookshare. You can also sign off on Learning Ally. Learning Ally used to be reading for the blind and dyslexic. As a therapist, you can sign off so a child can get access to Learning Ally as well. Audible is the paid audiobooks. If you're a teacher, Epic Books is great because you can assign kids books to listen to. And for most schools, Epic Books is free. Carmelita said she saw that they were charging something, but my account is still free. So I'm not sure. But there's so many Audible books on Epic Books that are easy. State and local libraries have lots of books. Sometimes you have to wait to check them out or get on the waiting list. But if you get with the state library, there's tons of books. For written expression, these are good programs. You've got Dragon Naturally Speaking. You have just your Google Docs, teach speech to text. Most computer devices have the speech to text, and you can do that just as easily as Dragon Naturally Speaking. The other one is the cell phone speech to text. So let's look at accommodations and modifications for math. A lot of our kids need math manipulatives, and we can't take them away. They have to have them. A lot of our kids need to be excluded from the time drills. What I'll do is I'll ask the teacher if he can be excluded from being graded by the time drills. And I'll say he could still do the time drills, just don't grade him on them. Just see how far he gets and say, oh, look, you got 2 more problems than last time. Great. So instead of putting you got 20 wrong, hey, you got 20 right. Now, this time you got 25 right. Look how you're improving. Look how much better it is. But they don't get a grade on it. Allow the use of a calculator for math facts. It's multisensory. They have to actually physically put in the number. It's actually way more work for them to go in 9 times 9 and put it in the calculator to get the answer. It's way more work for them than it would be for someone to just write it down. And you know what? They're getting the correct answer every time. Pretty soon they don't have to put in the calculator because it's multisensory. They've typed it in so many times. Pretty soon after getting their 500 to 3,000 repetitions of what 9 times 9 is, then they don't have to do it anymore. So it's a great tool. Allow the use of a multiplication chart, same as a calculator. Once they look it up, it's a lot of work to look up stuff on a multiplication chart. But after you do it so many times and get the correct answer, it's going to stick. Reduced homework load, less problems for math. Print the problems for the student. This is huge for that child who's dysgraphic. And when you go from like 3rd grade to 4th grade, and all at once you have a math book. You don't just get a math book that has the problems written down, but you have a math book that you have to copy the problem out of the math book and you have to put it on a piece of paper. Oh my gosh, that is a mess for our kids. So oftentimes I'll have them put the paper and use their notebook paper this way, where they have columns to write their numbers. Just turning the notebook paper can make a huge difference, or using large graph paper can make a huge difference. Taking that page in the math book, take it, copy it, and blow it up on the computer where the child has a large copy and they don't have to copy. Or if another child's copied the problems down, go print it off or do it for them. But this is something my kids just could not do. They could not copy from the book to the page, and they would miss their math problem, not because they couldn't do the math, they'd miss it because they couldn't copy. So that's a huge accommodation for our kids. The other thing is they need help with steps in a process. So maybe some mnemonics for steps in a process, such as how do I divide? Does McDonald's serve burgers? Can help some kids. Or dad, mom, sister, brother, Rover can help some kids. Or there are other methods out there that if you have a child that has a hard time with division and multiplication, holler at me, because we have a book called Simple Math, and it was like a lifesaver for my daughter to do division. I didn't think my daughter would ever be able to do long division. She would hide her book, and then she finally just threw her book away in the trash and I couldn't find it. And then she'd just sit there like this and give me the worst looks ever. And I'm like, okay, I get it. We got to come up with a different way to teach you division. So let's look, what are some accommodations for testing? A quiet environment, instructions given orally. Student needs ample time to complete tests with no restrictions. Student needs extended time to process and respond to information or requests for information. Maybe they need repetition of the directions. Maybe they're allowed to dictate their answers for writing responses. And again, my favorites, they're not graded on anything but content. Extra time on tests and assessments. If you ever have anyone questioning it, it rarely improves the performance of the student with dyslexia. Or for students without learning disabilities. So, either they know the testing information or they don't. Then, if they know the information and they get extra time to process, they're probably going to do really well. But if you gave a normal child extra time to process and they didn't know the information, they're not going to do any better than if they would have taken the test, with extended time. So not every student needs or benefits from extended time. Extended time provides students with time to use strategies needed to accomplish tasks inherently difficult for them, such as if they have trouble decoding single words and it takes them more time to read and they have to reread it over and over again in order to comprehend it. So when people say, well, it's not fair that that student got extra time and the rest of students didn't, fair is everyone gets what he or she needs. And that's the definition of fair, is every student gets what he or she needs. So some students who may benefit from extended time also need to be taught how to use that extended time. What are some strategies that you can do? You have extra time, so what are some things you can do to make that extra time work for you? Students who routinely read too fast for either accuracy or comprehension need to learn explicit word identification strategies, as well as improving their reading for comprehension. Practice is the key to effective use of accommodations. And accommodations must be integrated in the classroom practice before they can use it on assessments. So keep this in mind. Accommodation is not a substitute for appropriate intervention and remediation. An accommodation such as extended time can be the bridge between success and failure for a student with dyslexia. The critical difference is we're leveling the playing field. To achieve this success, students with dyslexia usually require a purposefully planned combination of intervention and remediation with appropriate intensity and duration. So if you were going into school, and I'm going to give you guys this is what a 504 plan looks like. A 504 plan, if you were going to, and when my students were in a school, I would actually print this off ahead of time and I would write up the 504 plan and then take it to the school. You know, and as a therapist, you can write up, this is the 504 plan I think my kid, the student needs. You know, what can we do to implement this? And so you're going to check what disability or impairment does the child have, describe what kind of evaluation was given, the data used, those kinds of things. And then you're going to talk about, okay, what's the specific need? What's the accommodation? What special material or training do they need? Who's going to implement that accommodation? And what's the criteria for evaluating the success of that accommodation? And I meant to include this in your handout. And so I'll make you guys a copy of that and include it in your handout. So this is what it looks like. But that's straight from the state. So I got all this information from a model of success for individuals with learning disabilities and accommodations for students with dyslexia from IDEA. So questions, comments?